In 1960, the U.S. was reeling from the shoot-down of Gary Powers in his U-2 spy plane. The message was clear. High altitude wasn't enough anymore. We needed speed. Kelly Johnson and the Skunk Works team began work on Archangel 12. But this wasn't a Pentagon project. It was a CIA operation. To keep it off the books, the government created black funds that bypassed Congress. The plane was built in total secrecy at Area 51. The most illegal part of the construction. The A-12 required massive amounts of titanium to withstand the heat of Mach 3 flight. The U.S. had no domestic supply. In a move of peak Cold War irony, the CIA set up front companies in third world countries to buy raw titanium from the Soviet Union. They built the ultimate American spy plane using Russian metal. The A-12 wasn't flown by Air Force pilots. To maintain plausible deniability, the CIA required its pilots to voluntarily resign their military commissions. On paper, they were civilians. If they were captured or killed, the U.S. government could claim they were private contractors or adventurers. They were legally ghosts. These men lived in a secret town built at Area 51. Their families told they were on business trips. They flew in suits that looked like space gear because at 90,000 feet their blood would boil if the cockpit depressurized. This act explores the psychological toll of being a non-person flying a trillion-dollar secret at 3 times the speed of sound. While the world was beginning to hear whispers of the Air Force's SR-71 Blackbird, the A-12 Oxcart was already deep in the shadows, doing the illegal work that could never be admitted. In 1967, under the code name Operation Black Shield, 3 A-12s were deployed to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa. These weren't military deployments in the traditional sense. They were CIA black ops. The pilots flew into the most heavily defended airspace on the planet, North Vietnam, at 80,000 feet and Mach 3.2. The missions were terrifying. At those speeds, the friction with the air heated the titanium skin of the plane to over 600 degrees Fahrenheit. The fuel didn't just power the engines, it acted as a coolant for the pilot, circulating through the airframe to keep the man inside from being baked alive. On October 30, 1967, pilot Dennis Sullivan was tracking surface-to-air missile sites when his radar warning gear went haywire. The North Vietnamese had fired at least 6 SA-2 missiles at him. Sullivan didn't dive or flare. He simply pushed the throttles forward. He watched in his rear-view periscope as the massive missile plumes detonated miles behind him, unable to even touch the ghost plane. When he landed, ground crews found a tiny piece of shrapnel embedded in the lower wing, the only time a Soviet missile ever got close enough to touch an Oxcart. But the real illegal tragedy of the A-12 happened back in Washington, D.C. A bureaucratic civil war was erupting. The Air Force was jealous of the CIA's secret toy. They had their own version, the SR-71, which was heavier, carried a second crew member, and slower. To the Pentagon, having 2 identical-looking fleets was a budgetary redundancy. In a move that many historians call a stab in the back, the government ordered the A-12 program to be terminated just as it reached its peak performance. The order was brutal.
the CIA was told not just to stop flying, but to erase the fleet. In 1968, the remaining A-12s were flown back to Palmdale, California. These billion-dollar masterpieces of engineering, the fastest planes ever built, were literally cut into pieces with torches or placed into deep storage boxes. The illegal secret was being put back into the ground. The most painful part of this act was the disappearance of the pilots. These men, who had legally resigned from the Air Force to serve their country in secret, were suddenly men without a mission. They were told to never speak of Operation Black Shield. They couldn't tell their wives why they had been in Okinawa. They couldn't tell their children they were the fastest humans in the atmosphere. They were forced to return to regular military life or civilian jobs, carrying the weight of a ghost legacy that didn't officially exist. For decades, the SR-71 took all the glory in the history books, while the A-12, the plane that actually drew first blood, the plane built with illegal Russian metal, remained a classified footnote. It wasn't until the late 1990s that the CIA finally declassified the Oxcart files. Only then did the world realize that the Blackbird had a secret older brother who was faster, lighter, and far more dangerous. The A-12 Oxcart remains the ultimate symbol of the black budget era. It was a plane built by shell companies, fueled by secret money, and flown by non-existent pilots. It proved that at the height of the Cold War, the U.S. government was willing to break every international trade law and domestic protocol to maintain an invisible edge. The illegal spy plane was eventually killed by the very government that built it. But its ghost still haunts the high-speed corridors of aviation history. A reminder that some secrets are so fast they leave the truth behind in the dust.